Hello, I'm Sensei Askakio. Thank you for joining for this evening's meditation and sutra study. The title of today's talk will be Understanding the Storehouse Consciousness of Buddhism. These teachings are offered free of charge, but if you'd like to make a contribution, information for PayPal and CashApp can be found in the description for this talk. If you'd like to do a deep dive into Buddhist training, check out my book, Perfectly Ordinary Buddhist Teachings for Everyday Life. There's a link to a free sample chapter of the book also in the description for this talk. And finally, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be notified when we do meditation and sutra study in the future. So we'll start this evening's practice as we always do with a 15-minute guided meditation. I'll give you a moment to get into position. The only rule is that you need to be comfortable and you need to be in a position that you can hold for about 15 minutes without moving. Good. Now we straighten our backs, chin slightly tucked. We can close our eyes or we can keep them half closed. If we have them half closed, we point them down at a 45-degree angle to eliminate visual distractions. Place the left hand, palm up in our lap. Place the right hand, palm up atop the left hand. I'll keep time, so you don't need to worry about that. And we'll start our 15-minute guided meditation, as we always do, by focusing on the breath. Breathing in and out through the nose, signaling to our bodies that we're calm, that we're safe, that regardless of what may or may not have happened today, there are no problems that need to be solved right this moment. We can just breathe in and out through the nose. And as we're breathing, on every inhale, we poke out our belly button ever so slightly. Not to the point where it hurts, but to where we feel it. Adding this motion to the breath creates space in our stomach cavity so our diaphragm can drop into that empty space, allowing us to breathe easily and deeply. This deeper breathing through the nose engages the parasympathetic nervous system, once again signaling to our bodies that we're safe, that we can relax. And if our mind wanders, that's okay. We just say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to the act of breathing. Maybe we focus on the feeling of air moving in and out of our nostrils and our throat. We'll do this for about a minute. Wonderful. Now we'll add a visualization to the breathing. We'll envision a fire, a great ball of energy in our belly, specifically in the space behind our belly button, in what we in Buddhism call the hara. This energy is our favorite color. If we like blue, it's blue. If we like green, it's green. And with every inhale, we bring air into our lungs. And with every exhale, we visualize ourselves blowing on that fire, making it bigger and brighter with every breath. If our mind wanders, that's okay. We say hello to our thoughts. We bring our focus back to the breathing and the visualization. We'll do this for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. Wonderful. You're all doing so wonderfully, being so still, so peaceful. Now we'll continue with our meditation by extending a line of energy from our hara, from that space in our belly, down, 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 into the center of the earth. And once we reach the center, we find an energy that's identical to our own. And now we're going to pull that energy up into ourselves. With every inhale, we pull energy up, up, up from the earth, like we're drinking from a straw. And with every exhale, we blow on the fire in our belly, feeding our spiritual energy, making it bigger and brighter still. And we're just going to do that for a while. Breathe the energy of the earth into ourselves with the inhale. And then blow on that fire with the exhale, building up our spiritual strength for the days that lie ahead. We'll do this for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. No need to worry. And if our minds wander, that's okay. We just say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to the breathing and to the visualization. Wonderful. Now we're going to envision a second line of energy going up from our belly, up, up, up to the tops of our head, past our throat, past our nose, like a pipe. And now we're going to send energy through that pipe, just like water in a faucet. We're going to breathe in, pulling energy up from the earth to our hara. And with every exhale, we're going to push that energy out, up, 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 until it explodes out of the top of our head like a volcano and showers us in healing energy light. We're just going to do that for about 2 minutes. Bathe in our spiritual power, preparing ourselves for the days that lie ahead. We'll do that for about 2 minutes and I'll keep time. If our mind wanders, that's okay. We say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to the breathing and to the visualization. Wonderful. This evening has been such a peaceful, such a calm meditation as you move into spring and the days get longer. There's so much work to do. And practices like this are important to prepare us for that work. Thank you for doing this with me, but now it's time to bring our meditation to a close. So slowly, gently, we imagine the energy getting smaller and smaller as it comes out of the top of our head, until it barely reaches the top of our head, barely reaches our nose, barely reaches our throat, our solar plexus, until finally it stops right where it began, in our hara, that space in our belly, which is the seat of our spiritual power. And now we'll do the same with the energy channel going from our hara down to the center of the earth. Slowly, gently pulling it up, up, up into ourselves. Noticing that the earth has not been depleted. The more energy it gives, the more it has to give. Perhaps we give it a silent bow in our head as a thank you for helping us in our path towards enlightenment. Now we just sit and breathe like we did in the beginning, focusing and building up our hara with every breath. Reminding ourselves that this energy is always here if we need to call upon it. And now we bring our meditation to a close by moving our head to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, alternating, focusing on the physical sensation, until finally we come to center. And if our eyes are closed when we're ready, and only when we're ready, we open them. We'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Wonderful. Thank you for doing that with me. When we do practices like meditation, like chanting, offerings, they put us in a very good space, a very open space where we can more readily receive the teachings of the Dharma. That's why the Dharma talk traditionally comes towards the end of practice. We do the chanting, the bowing, the meditation. Once we're really in tune with our enlightened selves, with the Dharmakaya, now we talk about it, which is what we're going to do this evening. In our reading from the Awakening of Faith Sutra, again, the BDK English Tripitaka translation. The reading starts on page 16, section B, mind in terms of phenomena, and we'll be discussing the Storehouse Consciousness. The mind as phenomena, samsara, is grounded on the Tathagata Garbha. What is called the Storehouse Consciousness is that which is neither birth nor death, Nirvana, diffuses harmoniously with birth and death, samsara, and yet in which both are neither identical nor different. This consciousness has two aspects that embrace all states of existence and create all states of existence. They are the aspect of enlightenment and the aspect of non-enlightenment. Translator's note. The Storehouse Consciousness, according to the Yogacara school of Mahayana Buddhism, the system of perception, mind, ego consciousness, and subconscious mind, is divided into 8 categories: the 5 sense perceptions, Vijnana, mind, Mano Vijnana, ego consciousness, and Alaya Vijnana, Storehouse Consciousness. The relationship that exists between the Storehouse Consciousness and suchness, whether they are identical or non-identical, has been a subject of great contention among the sectarian scholars. What is essential here, according to the text, is that the Storehouse Consciousness be defined as the place of intersection of the absolute order and the phenomenal order, or enlightenment and non-enlightenment in human beings. The aspect of enlightenment. Back to the text. Original enlightenment. The essence of mind is free from thoughts. The characteristic of that which is free from thoughts is analogous to that of the sphere of empty space that pervades everywhere. The one without any second, i.e. the absolute aspect of the world of reality, Dharma Dhatu. It's none other than the undifferentiated Dharmakaya, the essence body of the Tathagata. Since the essence of mind is grounded on the Dharmakaya, it is to be called the original enlightenment. Why? Because original enlightenment indicates the essence of mind a priori, in contradistinction to the essence of mind in the process of actualization of enlightenment. The process of actualization of enlightenment is none other than the process of integrating the identity with the original enlightenment. Translator's note. The process of actualization of enlightenment, if translated literally, is the inception of enlightenment. By this expression, the author denotes the entire process from the inception of enlightenment or awakening to the full realization of enlightenment. The process of actualization of enlightenment. Grounded on the original enlightenment is non-enlightenment, and because of non-enlightenment, the process of actualization of enlightenment can be spoken of. Translator's note. Original enlightenment is intrinsic, but non-enlightenment is accidental. The latter is the unactualized state of the same original enlightenment. That is to say, human beings are originally enlightened or saved, but suffer because they do not realize that they are enlightened or saved and continue on as blind or faithless persons, groping for enlightenment or salvation elsewhere. The premise is that if human beings are not enlightened or saved originally, there is no possibility of their attaining enlightenment or salvation at all. Back to the text. Now, to be fully enlightened to the fountainhead of mind is called the final enlightenment, and not to be enlightened to the fountainhead of mind, non-final enlightenment. What is the meaning of this? An ordinary person becomes aware that his former thoughts were wrong. Then he is able to stop, nirodha, such thoughts from arising again. Although this sometimes may also be called enlightenment, Properly, it is not enlightenment at all, because it is not enlightenment that reaches the fountainhead of mind. The followers of the Hinayana who have some insight, and those bodhisattvas who have just been initiated, become aware of the changing state of thoughts and are free from thoughts which are subject to change, such as the existence of a permanent self, Atman, etc. Since they have forsaken the rudimentary attachments derived from unwarranted speculation, their experience is called enlightenment in appearance. Bodhisattvas who have come to the realization of the Dharmakaya become aware of the temporarily abiding state of their thoughts and are not arrested by them. Since they are free from their rudimentary false thoughts derived from the speculation that the components of the world are real, their experience is called approximate enlightenment. Those bodhisattvas who have completed the stages of a bodhisattva and who have fulfilled the expedient means needed to bring forth the original enlightenment to the fullest extent will experience the oneness with suchness in an instant. They will become aware of how the inceptions of the deluded thoughts of the mind arise and will be free from the rise of any deluded thought. Since they are far away, even more subtle, deluded thoughts, they are able to have an insight into the original nature of mind. The realization that mind is eternal is called the final enlightenment. It is therefore said in a sutra that if there is a man who is able to perceive that which is beyond thoughts, he is advancing towards the Buddha wisdom. Here, the author of translator's note. Here, the author applies in the analysis of the process of the actualization of enlightenment the four characteristic states of existence in reverse order. The four characteristic states are arising, the coming into existence, analogous to birth of a child; abiding, the state of continuity and growth, analogous to the stage from childhood to manhood; change, the state of changing periods, analogous to the period from the prime of life to old age; and stopping, the period of senility and destruction. These four characteristic states, when used in a cosmic sense, designate one cycle of the cosmic age that continues with infinite repetition. This application of the four characteristic states of existence in reverse order for the description of the process of the actualization of enlightenment seems to be unknown elsewhere. The simile of a dream, or of mistaking a rope for a snake, treasured especially in the writings of the Yogacara school of Buddhism, might be helpful in understanding the first sentence of the last paragraph, which is insufficiently explained. To illustrate, only when awake can one realize the true nature of a dream. While dreaming, one is not aware that one is dreaming. Being aware that it was a dream, one can be free from the dream. Similarly, only when a correct view is established can one realize that one's former views were wrong and be able to understand why wrong views were entertained on certain partial or incorrect assumptions. Only then will one be free from the rise of any deluded thoughts. That it is said, back to the text, there is an inception of the rising of deluded thoughts in the mind. There is no inception as such that can be known as being independent of the essence of mind. And yet, to say that the inception of the rising of deluded thoughts is known means that it is known as existing on the ground of that which is beyond thoughts, i.e., the essence of mind. Accordingly, all ordinary beings, all ordinary people are said not to be enlightened because they have had a continuous stream of deluded thoughts and have never been freed from their thoughts. Therefore, they are said to be in a beginningless ignorance. If a person gains insight into that which is free from thoughts, then he knows how those thoughts that characterize the mind, i.e., deluded thoughts, arise, abide, change, and cease to be. For he is identical with that which is free from thoughts. But in reality, No difference exists in the process of the actualization of enlightenment because the four states of rising, abiding, etc. exist simultaneously, and each of them is not self-existent. They are originally of one and the same enlightenment, in that they are taking place on the ground of original enlightenment as its phenomenal aspects. And again, original enlightenment, when analyzed in relation to the defiled state in the phenomenal order, presents itself as having two attributes. One is the purity of wisdom, and the other is the supra-rational functions. Translator's note. Purity of wisdom and the supra-rational functions of the absolute or enlightenment can be discussed only in relation to phenomena or non-enlightenment about the absolute or enlightenment. In its total transcendent aspect, nothing can be said. Purity of wisdom. Back to the text. Purity of wisdom by virtue of the permeation of the influence of Dharma, i.e. the essence of or original enlightenment, a person comes to truly discipline himself and fulfills all expedient means of unfolding enlightenment. As a result, he breaks through the compound consciousness, i.e. the storehouse consciousness, that contains both enlightenment and non-enlightenment, puts an end to the manifestation of the stream of deluded thoughts, and manifests the Dharmakaya, i.e. the essence of mind for his wisdom, becomes genuine and pure. What is the meaning of this? All modes of mind and consciousness under the state of non-enlightenment are products of ignorance. Ignorance does not exist apart from enlightenment, therefore it cannot be destroyed, because one cannot destroy something that does not really exist. And yet it cannot be destroyed insofar as it remains. This is like the relationship that exists between the water of the ocean, i.e. enlightenment, and its waves, i.e. modes of mind, stirred by the wind, i.e. ignorance. Water and wind are inseparable, but water is not mobile by nature. And if the mind stops, the movement ceases. But the wet nature remains undestroyed. Likewise, a person's mind, pure in its own nature, is stirred by the wind of ignorance. Both mind and ignorance have no particular forms of their own, and they are inseparable. Yet mind is not mobile by nature, and if ignorance ceases, then the continuity of deluded activities ceases. But the essential nature of wisdom, i.e. the essence of mind, like the wet nature of the water, remains undestroyed. Super-rational functions. He who has fully uncovered the original enlightenment is capable of creating all manner of excellent conditions because his wisdom is pure. The manifestation of his numberless excellent qualities is incessant. Accommodating himself to the capacity of other people, he responds spontaneously, reveals himself in manifold ways, and benefits them. One moment, I'll take a drink of water, then we'll get started with the Dharma talk. Lovely. I love reading the sutras because it's almost like I can hear the author's voice. I can feel their energy coming through the centuries and speaking and teaching all of us with their wisdom and their compassion. So what is Avagosa talking about in this text when he talks about the storehouse consciousness, when he talks about the relationship between the Dharmakaya and samsara, samsara being the phenomenal world that we live in? Well, first off, we have to understand what original enlightenment means. And this is sometimes called Hongaku. And Hongaku is an essential teaching in the Mahayana Buddhist sects. it was central to the Tendai Buddhist school. And then many of the students who started in the Tendai school went on to start their own Buddhist schools. So Dogen and Soto Zen, Rinzai Isai and Rinzai Zen, Shinran and Honen, Pure Land Buddhism, Nichiren Buddhism, all came from the Tendai school of Buddhism. And the Tendai school of Buddhism held very closely to this teaching of Avagosa, this teaching of original enlightenment. So you find smatterings of it in all of those different Buddhist schools. This is why I think non-sectarianism is so important, because if we look beyond the surface, what we find in the history and in the text is that the foundational teachings are very often the same, even though they may be elucidated in different ways. And original enlightenment simply means that we are, by our nature, enlightened. That we are Buddhas, that we are part of the Dharmakaya, which is the essence of enlightenment. And that is something that has never changed and never will change. But this, of course, begs the question, if we're already enlightened, if we're already Buddhas, why don't we act that way? Why aren't we all perfectly calm, perfectly rational, perfectly enlightened beings in our everyday life? And what the text is telling us is that's an accident caused by ignorance. We've forgotten our true nature. We've forgotten that we are the Dharmakaya, that we are the Storehouse Consciousness. And the practice of Buddhism is simply to remind us of who we are so that we can actualize our enlightenment in daily life. This also answers the question that if we're already enlightened, why do we need to practice Buddhism? Well, technically speaking, strictly speaking, we don't. You're already enlightened whether you practice Buddhism or you don't practice Buddhism. The Buddha didn't gain anything when he was under the Bodhi tree. He realized what he already had. And then he created a system in Buddhism, in the Four Noble Truths, in the Noble Eightfold Path, etc., to help us do the same. This is elucidated in the Lotus Sutra, in the story of a wealthy man who sews a pearl into the pocket of his friend. His friend is very poor, he's degenerate, he's making some bad decisions. And the friend doesn't realize that he has this wealth in his jacket pocket, and he lives a very hard life as a result. Sometimes he doesn't have a place to sleep, sometimes he goes without eating. And it's only after several years have passed when his wealthy friend has come back from a voyage. In the story, he's usually a merchant, and merchants were often gone for years at a time, way back in the day. It's only after his friend tells him, hey, you've got a treasure right there in your jacket, that he realizes he doesn't have to live that way anymore. That he has the ability to buy food, that he has the ability to get a place to sleep. In that story, the Buddha is the wealthy friend, and we are the not so wealthy friend. We're the friend making bad decisions because we don't know the pearl that's in our pocket. And the Buddha, in his compassion and his wisdom, and the many patriarchs and matriarchs that came after him in their compassion and wisdom, are teaching us about this treasure we have, this original enlightenment that we have. Because once we realize we have it, it gets put into our daily life and we can actualize that enlightenment. But we have to crawl before we can run. Well, we have to crawl before we can walk. We have to walk before we can run. So in Buddhism, we kind of fake it till we make it. I don't know if I'm a Buddha, but I'm going to act like it anyway. I'm going to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. I'm going to practice right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to step out in faith, faith in myself, faith in the path, and I'm going to give it a try. And then what generally happens, at least what happened to me in my own training, is we have these tiny experiences. Some people call them enlightenment moments. I call them more aha moments because sometimes they're very subtle. And we get little glimpses of, oh, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can live and speak and act in accordance with the Dharma. And look how good it feels when I do this. Maybe this really is who and what I am. Maybe I really am a Buddha. The truth is, we never stopped being Buddhas, in the same way that waves never stopped being part of the ocean. It's interesting, when we go to the beach, we never say, I'm going to the waves. We say, I'm going to the ocean, even though the waves are there, moved around by the wind. We know that the ocean is what's important, because that's where the waves come from. We understand that the waves in the ocean are the same. And it's the same with us. As the text said, our minds are blown by the winds of ignorance, and we have these thoughts. But we have to remember that the thoughts aren't who we are. The Dharmakaya is who we are. The Storehouse Consciousness is who we are. Buddha is who we are. That's why in meditation, we watch our thoughts and we come back to the breath. We watch our thoughts, we come back to the visualization. Over and over and over again, because we have to break ourselves out of the illusion of the dream that our thoughts are who and what we really are. Sometimes we have these ideas in Buddhism that we have to get rid of our thoughts, that we need to clear our heads, and that's not true. And sometimes, if we're not practicing Buddhism, we have this thought that our thoughts are who and what we are, that if something comes into our heads, we have to act on it. I think it, I have to say it. And that's not true either. What Avagosa is reminding us is that the waves are not the ocean. They're there, yes, but they're not important. And when we realize they're not important, and yet they're not unimportant because they are still part of the ocean, what happens? We don't run away from them, but we don't run towards them either. Instead, we learn to work with them skillfully. You think of a surfer. Surfers do amazing tricks, barrel rolls and 360s on the waves of the ocean. Why? Because they learn to work with them skillfully. It's the same with us and our thoughts and our emotions. We don't try to get rid of our emotions. We're human beings. And because we're human beings, we're going to have anger. We're going to have sadness. We're going to have frustration. We don't try to get rid of our thoughts because, again, we're human beings. We're Nirmanakaya. We're going to have thoughts come into our heads. But if we understand original enlightenment, we understand that our thoughts and our emotions are not separate from enlightenment. Just like samsara is not separate from nirvana, to borrow a phrase from Nagarjuna. They're one and the same. They're aspects of something larger. So that's why in meditation, we say hello to our thoughts and we come back to the meditation. We notice that they're there, but then we focus on the big picture, just like a surfer. Notices the waves are there, but he's not scared of falling into the ocean. One could think of it like a sandcastle on the beach. If we build up a sandcastle, it's a sandcastle, right? It's a thing. But it's not separate from the sand that it came from. They're one and the same. The sandcastle is an aspect of the beach. And if we understand that relationship, then we can enjoy the sandcastle and we can build it and we can have fun with our friends. And when it's time to go and the tide comes in and washes the sandcastle away, well, that's fine because we understand that's the nature of the sandcastle. Our lives work in the same way. They're sandcastles on the beach of our original enlightenment. We build them up. We have jobs. We have friends. We have families. We have homes and careers. We do things just like we build sandcastles on the beach. And at the same time, we understand that it is the nature of the sandcastle to eventually be washed away. In the same way, it's the nature of our lives to be eventually washed away. Birth, aging, sickness, and death. We are of a nature to engage in all of these things, or as they say in the text, existing, arising, existing, changing, stopping. Birth, aging, sickness, death. Once we understand our phenomenal nature, we're better able to understand our absolute nature. The reason we suffer, and this is the accident of our birth, is that we don't understand the nature of the phenomenal world. We think it's supposed to be permanent. We think that every relationship we get into is supposed to last forever. We think that nothing's ever supposed to break around our house. We think that if we have a job, that it should be perfect and wonderful every time we go in. And then if it doesn't act that way, if it acts in accordance to its phenomenal nature, if it's born, if it ages, if it gets sick, if it dies, then we think we did something wrong, or we think someone else did something wrong. We blame ourselves, we blame the world. And then we get on this hedonic treadmill of constantly moving from one thing to another, trying to find something permanent. And we suffer as a result. It's like the child at the beach who builds a sandcastle and they cry when the waves wash it away. As adults, we don't cry because we understand, again, the nature of the sandcastle is to be washed away. So what Avagosa is trying to teach us about original enlightenment, the relationship between the phenomenal world and the absolute world, is it's the nature of the phenomenal world, every aspect of it, including ourselves, to eventually be washed away. But we can still enjoy the phenomenal world while we're here. This is the middle way of Buddhism. This is what Buddha discovered in his own path. He tried to hold on to the world when he lived in the palace and he was a hedonist. He tried to escape it when he was an ascetic and he stopped eating. Neither of these worked. It was only when he worked with the phenomenal world skillfully that he was able to sit under the Bodhi tree and realize enlightenment. Not before. And it's the same with us. It's only when we work with our own everyday lives skillfully that we'll realize enlightenment. This is why I say that everyday life is enlightenment, that your daily life is Buddhist practice. That's not just me trying to make you feel good, even though I do want you to feel good. That's the canonical Buddhist teaching according to the Mahayana. This daily life is an aspect of the absolute. It's an accident that we don't realize it, but our Buddhist training helps us do so, helps us practice non-attachment. And that's interesting because we as Westerners often think that the point of Buddhism is detachment, that we're supposed to turn away from the world. But that's not correct. Why would we turn away from the world when the world is the absolute? It is the original enlightenment, or an aspect of it at least. It is the Dharmakaya. To understand how this works, we can look at our relationships with a flower. Let's say we're walking along a path and we see a beautiful rose. Attachment is picking that rose and trying to take it home with us. Now no one else gets to enjoy it. The rose eventually dies. And then we go out and we kill other flowers. That's attachment. And we do that a lot in our daily lives. Detachment is refusing to look at the rose altogether because we understand it's phenomenal. We understand it'll eventually go away. So I'm not even going to engage. But that's not what Buddhism teaches either. Again, that's that extreme view. We have hedonism on the one side, pick the rose. We have asceticism on the other side, don't even look at it. What Buddhism teaches is the middle way. We understand the nature of the rose and we appreciate its beauty. So what do? We look at it, we smile, we enjoy the flower for what it is, and then we leave it there and we walk away. Non-attachment, we hold it with empty hands. We don't try to take it with us. We don't turn away from it. We enjoy it in the moment, and then we leave it for others to enjoy. When we understand original enlightenment, we're able to do the same with our daily lives. We interact with the world, we experience it, we have good meals and we enjoy them. We read books and have families and friends, and they're all great and wonderful and beautiful. And at the same time, we understand that eventually those friends are going to die. Eventually, we're going to get to the end of the book. Eventually, that picture we love so much is going to fall and the frame is going to crack into a million pieces. Birth, aging, sickness, death. It's all a part of this phenomenal world, but it's not a problem as long as we accept that fact. As long as we understand that this is all a part of the Dharmakaya, of the original enlightenment, and that we are subject to the same. I had a thought and then I lost it. That's how the phenomenal world works. So I guess I'll just close and end with this, and then we'll move into the question and answer portion of this evening's chat. Is that when we talk about the Dharmakaya, and eventually when we talk about the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya, the Trikaya teaching of Buddhism, the best way to understand it is the Nirmanakaya, that's us, the physical Buddhas. We are the characters within the book. The Sambhogakaya, or the celestial beings, the Jizo, the Kannon, the Manju, they are the pages within that book. And the Dharmakaya, the essence of enlightenment, the essence of Buddha, is the book itself. We can't separate the characters of a book from the book. We can't separate ourselves from the Dharmakaya. But we have to awaken from the dream of our reality in order to see the big picture. This is where the accident comes in. Just like Avagosa said, when we're living too much in the conventional world, when we're stuck in the dream, we don't realize it's phenomenal. So we wake up and we're sweating and our hearts are pounding because we had a nightmare. Or maybe we're sad because we actually had a really good dream and now it's over. What Buddhism is telling us over and over and over again is wake up. See the dream for what it is. And once we see the dream for what it is, we can enjoy the dream because we know the truth of our reality. Amitabha. So that's the talk for this evening. I hope it was helpful. Now we'll move into the Q&A portion of this evening's chat, where if you have questions about the reading, about Buddhism in general, or if you just have comments you'd like to share with me in the group, you can type those in the chat and I'll be sure to respond. While we're waiting for those to come in, I'll make a few announcements. Please make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel first off. That way you'll be notified when we do live streams in the future. If you'd like to take part in the live stream for meditation and sutra study moving forward, it happens every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The practice consists of a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from a sutra. Right now, we're studying the Awakening of Faith Sutra. We have about 4 more weeks with that. Then we do a Dharma talk, followed by a Q&A. Additionally, every Sunday, we do Dharma Sunday, which is a bit simpler. We do the Dharma talk and then a Q&A. And in that talk, I take canonical Buddhist teachings and I try to tie them to some real-world event that's taking place. That's also live streamed here, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Tune in for that as well. We'd love to have you. So, looking at the chat, we have a Great Hermit. Good to see you again, Great Hermit. Said, good evening, Sensei. And then the bow emoji. Thank you, Great Hermit. Good evening to you as well. Divad Buddha X, good to see you again. He said, could you explain the demigod, God, and human realms? Hey, oh, that's kind of a big concept, but very simply, in Buddhist cosmology, there are different realms of existence. And depending on what Buddhist school you're a part of, sometimes they're understood as states of mind. So hell in Buddhism is a state of mind. And in some schools, it's a literal place that we go to, depending on our karma and our actions. Both teachings are useful. Just grab onto whichever one works for you. When we talk about the God realms, the demigod realms, and the human realms, we have the human realm here, which is in the middle. And then above that, we have the demigod and then the God realms. Now, what's interesting about the demigod and the God realms is that how we in Buddhism treat demigods and gods. So if you think of Hercules, for example, not Buddhism, but a figure that everyone's familiar with, and then Zeus, who is his father. Hercules could be seen as a demigod, and then Zeus would be a god in Greek mythology. So the demigods are very powerful, very strong, still mostly phenomenal, still mostly human beings. The gods are more or less celestial beings. The difference, however, between the gods and the bodhisattvas is the gods have not realized enlightenment. They're very powerful, they're very strong, they can influence human life, but they are not one with their true nature. They don't understand the teaching of original enlightenment. So we see this in Greek mythology where the gods, frankly, behave pretty boorishly and pretty terribly oftentimes. Zeus was horrible to his wife Hera. He cheated on her multiple times, had many children out of wedlock. Not a good person, but extremely powerful, extremely strong, a celestial being. He was a god. We look at Hercules, a demigod, part human, part god, very strong, very powerful, but again, still given to all the qualms of human nature. So in Buddhism, we acknowledge these other realms. We acknowledge gods, we acknowledge demigods. However, we don't aspire to be like them or to exist in those realms because our goal is not to have superpowers. Our goal is to realize enlightenment. Now, the problem is if you are Zeus, if you are a sky father, if you are the king of the gods in the Greek mythology, you are so powerful and so strong that you don't see the need for spiritual practice. Why would Zeus, even though he is a Buddha, why would he want to practice Buddhism when he can just throw thunderbolts at anyone who harms him, right? So we don't want to be gods. Same with Hercules, right? Why would, if he can just grab his club and beat people over the head, why would he feel the need to practice spirituality? So we acknowledge the gods, we acknowledge demigods, but we actually kind of feel sorry for them because they're not in a position where they can realize enlightenment in this lifetime. We as humans, however, are very fortunate because we have that correct balance of suffering and non-suffering, power and helplessness, where we can do stuff to make our lives better, but we can't do everything. So even though we may not have the initial inclination, we are naturally pulled towards spirituality. We are pulled towards the Dharma. We are still trapped in the dream, just like Zeus, just like Hercules, but we have the wherewithal to learn how to get out of that dream. Which is why, if you look at the Buddhist sutras, we look at Brahma, Indra, they make appearances and they speak to the Buddha and they bow to him and they receive teachings from him, or they encourage him to go give teachings to others. In some tellings of the mythology, it was the god Indra who spoke to Buddha. In some tellings, it's Brahma. Either way, it was a god who went to him under the Bodhi tree and said, "These teachings are wonderful. You have to share them with the rest of the world." So Simply put, that's the Buddhist understanding of gods and demigods. We acknowledge them, they exist. However, we also see their shortcomings, and we aspire to actualize our own enlightened nature as opposed to going to a demigod or a god realm. Farzana's Law said, fantastic video. Thank you, Farzana. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Wonderful. Glad to have you here this evening. Alison Gerfin said, thank you for explaining the relevance of the sutra to those schools of Buddhism. You also made it much more grounded than abstract. Very cool. Thank you, Alison, so much. That's very high praise. Good to see you this evening. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So I'm glad it's working. Because one thing I struggled with in my own practice is that Buddhism is so rich as a tradition that sometimes, and I say this as someone who majored in philosophy, it's almost too philosophical. If you read the works of Dogen, if you read the works of Shinran sometimes, it's hard to, first off, just understand what they're saying. But even if you do understand, it's hard to understand the relevance to daily life, right? How does original enlightenment help me when my cat, goes potty in his litter box? So I'm glad I was able to make it grounded and make it understandable. Wonderful. Thank you again. Great Hermit said, if someone were to ask me what is Buddhism, how should I respond? Ooh, well, that's tough because Buddhism is very big. There's lots of ways you can answer. The way I generally answer is that Buddhism is a method and tradition for helping us get in touch with our enlightened nature so that we can end suffering for ourselves and other people. That's what I go with. And I think it kind of encapsulates what we're doing here. We're practicing the Dharma so that we can actualize our enlightened nature, and in doing so, we end suffering for ourselves and other people. So Buddhism is the lectionary or the steps that allow us to do that. Starting with right view in the Noble Eightfold Path. We see the world clearly as phenomena. We see ourselves clearly as Buddha. And then that, boom, 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 leads to everything else. Frank Ingiosi said, thank you for your teaching, Sensei. And then a bow. Thank you, Frank, for being here. Glad this teaching was helpful. Wonderful. Divad Buddha X said, I've read some Jataka tales. Any essential stories you recommend? Ooh, the Jataka tales are wonderful. I'll be honest, I haven't read them in their completion in a while. But I honestly would just tell you to really go through them, pile through them. They're all fantastic. And what's cool about the Jataka tales is I feel like those tales were the Buddha trying to do what I and others are trying to do, is kind of ground the teachings using allegory and metaphor to really explain, well, what is compassion? What is wisdom? I'm thinking of one story in particular from the Jataka tales where the Buddha comes upon a hungry tigress and her cubs. And because she's starving, he willingly allows himself to be killed and eaten so that she can have food and then provide milk for her cubs. Now, I'm not telling any of you to do that. And if I personally ever see a tiger, I will walk quickly in the other direction. But I think that's a good summation of the level of compassion that we're ascribing to. Though, again, I don't think we should feed ourselves to tigers, just that selflessness that comes from the Buddhist practice, from the Dharma. So I don't have one in particular that I would say, read this one. I think they're all fantastic. And I think it's good that you're reading them because they're very helpful and they help ground the teachings very much. Excellent. Great Hermit said, I like your practice. More Dharma talk and only 15 minutes of meditation. Other temples, I have been 1 hour of meditation and 15 minutes of talk. I've had similar experiences. I think there's several reasons for that. So one, just traditionally, and this is especially true in Zen, not so much in Pure Land Buddhism, because that's there's more of a focus on chanting. So if you go to a Pure Land Buddhist temple, you'll do chanting, and then they generally do, a fairly in-depth Dharma talk. But I know, especially in Zen, the focus is so much on the practice that the talk itself is seen as almost extra, not needed. The idea is the practice works on you. If you sit enough, if you bow enough, if you chant enough, stuff will happen. And that's true. I've experienced that myself. You can't sit on the cushion without feeling something, without being changed. You can't make offerings to the Buddha at the altar without being changed in some way. However, that takes time. And we as Westerners like to know why we're doing things before we start doing them. We like to talk. So I guess what I'm saying is the reason I format it that way, 15 minutes of meditation and then a longer talk, is kind of, while the practice is important, I think we as Westerners really need that verbal teaching. If you think of how we learn in school, we sit at desk and people talk to us. We go to college, same thing. So I think that's one of the things. I think you mentioned in a previous video, how do I think Buddhism will change in the West? I think that's one of the ways. I think it's important that the practices remain. I'm very big on the traditional Buddhist practices, but I think there will be more of a focus, not just on the Dharma talk, but also how can the Dharma talk help me now? It's not just this is what Buddha said, but this is what Buddha said, and this is why it's important. So I'm glad this format works for you. I put a lot of thought into how I wanted to do it, and I'm glad there's been a good response to it. I've actually been to temples where there was no Dharma talk. You did the practice and then everyone went home, which I think is helpful, but I think the Dharma talk has merit too. It has power. I'm thinking, and I'm rambling a little bit, of Benki, who was a Zen Buddhist practitioner who went through very terrible ascetic practices, stopped eating, lived in a hut where there was total darkness, only a small inlet where people could give him food. And then after he went through all those practices, instead of coming down from the mountain and saying, well, you have to do what I did, he instead said, well, this is what I learned. So he was one of the first people to have, let's just sit and talk about Buddhism. We don't have to sit for an hour. We don't have to chant until our throats go dry. Though, again, those practices are important. You don't have to climb the mountain necessarily. I climbed it, and I'm going to tell you what I saw there. And he's a big influence for me, honestly, Benki. I've engaged in a lot of the traditional practices. I've done the 1-hour sits. I still do them. But I don't think it's necessary for you guys to do that necessarily. I think I can do them, and I can tell you what I learned from them. So, wonderful. Again, I'm so glad that this format works for you. Great Hermit, I want enlightenment and superpowers. Fair enough. Fair enough. I think given a choice, we'd all like both. I personally would like the power to teleport from one place to another. I think that'd be very helpful. So I'm right there with you. If you find a way where we can have both, please let me know, because I think it would be awesome. Loity said, how can I stop cursing people out on YouTube? I swear I do it and then I feel stupid. Why insult a random person even if they make me angry? Sorry, I don't know if we are in Q&A right now. And then you went on to say, I have trouble letting things go, Sensei. That's fair. We don't live in a culture where we're taught how to let things go. That's one thing about Buddhism and living in the West. We're very fortunate to live in the West. Going on a limb, I'm assuming we're all Westerners. Apologies if you're not. We have access to all this wonderful technology. There's electricity and running water and indoor plumbing and the internet, and we can learn the Dharma from the comfort of our homes instead of having to go up into mountains and caves and sit under trees getting stung by mosquitoes. So materially, the West is very wonderful, very rich, but spiritually, we have a lot of work to do. And that's a good example of that. And again, you're not alone. I've struggled with this as well. Lots of people do, because we're not in a culture where we're taught to let things go. We're taught to seek revenge. We're taught to get even. We're taught to read people, which is something my nephew told me about, where you just really put someone in their place with words. So completely understandable. What I would do, something that helped me, first off, was the meditative breathing we do during meditation. That breathing in and out through the nose, focusing on the breath, can be very helpful because it just pulls me out of that moment. Going back to what Avagosa was saying about us being in that dream, or actually, I believe it was a translator commenting Avagosa, talking about being in a dream. And we're so caught up in the dream that we don't realize that we need to wake up. It's only after we wake up that we have a good idea of what to do and what not to do. It's the same thing with social media. This is all a dream. I mean, the world is a dream, but social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram is especially a dream. But it's a dream we get caught up in. We get sucked in, myself included, and we start scrolling and scrolling, or we watch videos. And like you say, you cuss people out as if they're right in front of you. You know they're not. You know they can't hear what you're saying. Or maybe you're typing it. Either way, you don't know them, they don't know you, but we're so stuck in the dream that we do it anyway. So that practice of meditative breathing can be helpful to kind of pull us out of the dream. Chanting is also another good practice that's helpful. Namo Amida Butsu. I do that a lot in my head, especially on Twitter. There's just a lot of strange things that happen on Twitter, and I constantly have to chant Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. I take refuge in Amida Buddha. Again, because it pulls us out of the dream. So that's what I would do. Either the meditative breathing or the chanting. As you're doing social media, whatever it is, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, if you find something that really sucks you in and you want to react unskillfully, engage in those practices so that you can pull yourself out of that. And then also give yourself the space to understand that we are Nirmanakaya, we are human beings. We do get sucked in. And the purpose of this practice isn't to feel shame about that. It's to remind us, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. And then we pull ourselves out. Then we'll get sucked in again, and then we'll pull ourselves out again. So I'd encourage you to try those two things. And, if it works, if it doesn't work, let me know. We can talk about some other things as well. That's a wonderful thing about Buddhism. There's lots of tools in the toolbox. Let's see. Great Hermit said, which Buddhist school that does a lot of sutra reading and Dharma talk than meditation or chanting? Okay, sutra readings and Dharma talk. Pure Land Buddhism does a lot of sutra reading, a lot of Dharma talks. They do a lot of chanting as well. So a lot of sutra reading and Dharma talk. So I think you're trying to do something beyond the meditation and chanting, if I'm reading that correctly. So Pure Land does a lot of sutra study, a lot of Dharma talks, but they do a lot of chanting as well. Let's see. I know the Theravadan schools also. It's a little bit different because the teachings come from the Pali Canon, not from Mahayana text. But they also have a strong focus on sutra studying and Dharma talks as well. A little bit of a focus on meditation as well. You're gonna get at least 3 of the 4, no matter what. But I would probably encourage you to check out the Pure Land Buddhist schools. I think they may be up your alley. Nichiren Buddhism as well. now that I think about it. Also very heavy into chanting, but they also do quite a bit of Dharma talks as well. So probably the Pure Land or chanting if you're wanting to do more sutra study and Dharma talks and less seated meditation, in my experience. Divad Buddha X said, if Nirvana is inner peace, what would be a short definition for enlightenment? You went on to say, all this mention of dreams reminds me of The Matrix. Well, The Matrix was quite heavily influenced, quite heavily influenced by Taoism and also by Buddhism. There's a lot of Buddhism that can be found in The Matrix. So that's why you're having that experience of that connection there. And I keep wanting to give a talk and write a blog post at my blog, The Same Old Zen, about The Matrix, but there's so much there. And I mean, you could probably just write a whole book on the Buddhism in The Matrix. So trying to pare it all down to like this one thing I want to talk about is tough. But yeah, The Matrix is a great example of that, of being trapped in the dream. And then escaping the dream, Neo comes out of the Matrix, he's in the real world, and then realizing, oh wait, no, I'm still in the dream. This is just a different aspect of it, right? He's still in the real world, but he still has some of his powers. He can fight the Sentinels and shut them down. In the final movie, he returns to the source, which is an allegory for us returning to our original alignment, returning to the Dharmakaya. And I'm not going to go on the Matrix, right? But one of the key points that come from the Matrix is this. I remember the first movie, Neo escapes from the Matrix. And then the second movie comes out, Matrix Reloaded. And everyone's so, in my high school, what's it going to be like? What's Zion going to be like? And they were so disappointed when Zion was a giant cave. And the food was crappy and the clothes were threadbare and they still had machines, but they weren't computerized machines. And that's just such a good example of what Buddhism and Buddhist practice is like. Because what happens? We're trapped in the Matrix, we're trapped in the conventional world, and we escape and we think spiritual practice in Buddhism is going to be this big, fancy, expensive looking thing. And what is it? Well, we go to the temple and the clothes are threadbare and the food is okay, but it's not great. And we're sitting on the cushion and our legs hurt and we're chanting and we don't know what we're chanting and we're not sure if we're chanting correctly. Spiritual practice can be disappointing. I was disappointed at times, not because the spirituality didn't work, but because I had lots of lofty illusions of what it would look like. And it was the same way with Neo when he came out of the Matrix. I forget his name. Cypher, I think it was, who said, screw this, I want to go back to the Matrix. I don't care if it's an illusion. Steaks taste good. Same with us. A lot of people engage in these practices and realize, you know what? I kind of like that hedonistic lifestyle. I'm going to go back to it. Which is sad, but it's human. They go back into the dream. And then eventually they realize, hopefully, that this isn't as good as I remember. So they come back into the real world, which is harder, but it's real. It's true. And they can see the big picture. This is why we're gifted with multiple lives through reincarnation. That's why I always say reincarnation isn't a punishment. It's a gift. Because we get more and more and more and more chances to get it right. And what's really fortunate about us in this life, in the time we live in, is that we're able to realize enlightenment in only one lifetime. Because we have so many tools at our disposal. We're very fortunate. We can escape the Matrix and understand how to live in it completely, all at the same time. So that's my Matrix 101 rant. Great Hermit said, Sensei, do you have a Discord? And then you went on to say, it's a gaming chat social media platform. Oh, great question. No, I do not have a Discord. I've thought about starting one, but honestly, I'm kind of at my limit right now. Between Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, I don't think I can handle another social media platform, which is funny. I never thought I'd be the guy who's like, I don't like these newfangled things. Like Discord is great. Clubhouse is another one I keep hearing about. That's great, but I'm kind of full right now. So maybe in the future, but for the time being, no, I don't have a Discord. Loity said, thank you for the advice. I will try pranayama instead of giving into the rage. You are right. It's like I'm seeking revenge online. Appreciate you, with the bow emoji. I appreciate you, Loity. And I appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and to ask questions like that, because again, if you have that question as a human being, we're all human beings, so we all have that question, or we've all had that experience. So thank you for asking that question and providing the opportunity for us to learn and for me to teach, etc. It was very kind. Divad Buddha X said, if Nirvana is inner peace, what would be a short definition for enlightenment? A short definition. That word short makes it tough. I would simply call enlightenment our true nature. Going back to the text, the sandcastle is a phenomena, but its true nature is that of the beach. It's the nature of sand. We as human beings are phenomena, but our true nature is that of the Dharmakaya. It's that of enlightenment. So I would simply call enlightenment our true nature. Actualizing our true nature, becoming one with our true nature. Something along those lines. Let's see, any other questions, comments, concerns for this evening? It's been a very lively discussion. It's been great. Great Hermit said yes. All right, wonderful. Well, if that's all for this evening, again, we've got about, I have to look, it's either 2 or 3 more weeks left with the Awakening of Faith Sutra. So look forward to chatting with you again, guys, next Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, for meditation sutra study. Oh, wait, another question. Great Hermit asked, are we in the Dharma Ending Age? That is a good question. So for those of you who aren't aware, what Great Hermit is speaking of is, at times in the Mahayana, we talk about different ages of the Dharma. So the time of the Buddha, and this isn't the way it's described, but just to make it easy, was kind of the golden age, right? So people had very long lives. They had access to many deeply realized teachers. And then there was the middle age, where it was kind of half and half. And then it said that the Dharma Ending Age will come. And that will be the age where there are lots of false teachers. And it's very difficult to find the Dharma, and even harder to practice the Dharma, because people are being persecuted for practicing Buddhism. And I have heard people say that this is a Dharma Ending Age. Pure Land Buddhism, Shinran Shonin, popularized the Pure Land Buddhist teachings because he thought that he was in a Dharma Ending Age, that there were so many distractions and difficulties and persecutions that we can't practice Buddhism anymore. This is a Dharma Ending Age. So the only thing we can do is chant Namo Amida Butsu. I take refuge in Amida Buddha, and just put our faith in him. We can't do it anymore. We gotta let the big guy handle it. So in the strictest sense, I guess you could say this is a Dharma Ending Age, because not much has changed from the time of Shinran Shonin. We still have the same distractions, right? It's hard to support yourself and not have a job. So we have to have jobs, and because we have to have jobs, we have to pay for food and a place to live. And, how can I practice? Where can I practice? But at the same time, I would also say that this, even as we want to call it a Dharma Ending Age, is also a golden age for the Dharma, for Buddhism. Because at the same time that we have all of these distractions, we also have all of these tools. I'm thinking back to Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen, and how difficult it was for him to find the sutras, and how he stayed up all night when he found the sutras of Chan Buddhism, writing them down on bamboo scrolls because he couldn't take them with him. And now all we have to do, we can go to the library or hop on Amazon or go on YouTube, and boom, Dharma's right there, right? So I would say it's both. It is both the golden age of the Dharma, and it is a Dharma ending age. It's up to us to decide which one we want to actualize in daily life. What do we want this age to be? Is it Dharma ending? Is it Dharma actualizing? That's up to you and me. You also said, what does that mean? So I'm not sure, Great Hermit, what that was in reference to, but please elucidate in the chat if I didn't answer your question. Loa-D said, thank you, Sensei, with the bow emoji. Thank you, Loa-T. So wonderful to see you again here this evening. Thanks again for the question. Great Hermit said, why does the Dharma ending age sound so similar to the apocalypse from the Abrahamic religions? So that word apocalypse actually is very interesting because, well, first off, why does it sound similar? I think we as human beings always think it's the end of the world, right? Or we always think the end of the world is coming, or that it's here. Because again, being stuck in the dream, everything is so big and so important, and oh my, what are we going to do, right? It's only when we wake up from the nightmare that we realize, okay, we're fine. So I believe for Shinran Shonin and for the practitioners of the Abrahamic faiths, it probably did feel like the apocalypse. It probably did feel like the end of the world because we're trapped in the dream. The beauty of the Dharma and of Buddhism, however, is that we can wake up, and as we wake up, we realize, okay, this is not good. This is a bad situation, and it's okay to say it's a bad situation, but at the same time, I can deal with this. I can cope with it skillfully. It's okay. So there are similarities there. In the Abrahamic faiths, if we look at the Jews, for example, and how they were persecuted and enslaved, and they left Egypt and they had to go into Canaan, etc. It probably felt like the apocalypse was coming. Shinran Shonin being exiled and persecuted and sent, to who knows where, probably felt like the end of the world, but it wasn't. So that's why there's similarities there, just because human nature is similar across faiths and religions. In addition to that, the apocalypse word, however, though we often think of it as the end of the world, if we look at the definition, it actually is more akin to rebirth or revealing. So apocalypse isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's us seeing the world more clearly. And sometimes seeing the world clearly is a scary thing. Sometimes we don't like it because we're human beings. And we like our illusions, and we like our dreams, and we like our sugar-coated candy, even though it's unhealthy for us. But in Buddhism, what we're taught is that suffering, if used skillfully, apocalypse, if used skillfully, can be helpful in helping us realize and actualize our enlightenment. Shinran Shonin did this. He felt the apocalypse was there. He felt he was in a Dharma ending age. But instead of just being a hedonist and partying and giving up, he turned to Amida Buddha. He turned to Namo Amida Butsu. And he turned that apocalyptic suffering, that exile, that persecution, into the source of his awakening. And we can do the same. And I guess that would be kind of the difference between the Buddhist faith and the Abrahamic faiths, is that while apocalypse in Abrahamic faiths is often seen as an ending, apocalypse in Buddhism is a beginning. It's an awakening, it's a rebirth, it's a chance to do and try again, to do and try and be better, to be more awakened, to be more alive. But you're right, there are similarities there that can be seen. You also asked, so there are a couple questions here. Why does the Dharma Ending Age, oh, I already answered that, sorry. Why are there so many worlds in Buddhism, and why are there so many realms? Oh, it's a good question. Let's see. So essentially, why are there so many realms? Well, there's just many aspects to reality. I think of Indra's net, where there's an infinite number of jewels in the net, and they all reflect off of one another and within one another. There are many realms in this world. You know, why are there 50 states in the United States of America? Because that delineation helps us understand what goes where, and there's a history there that, you know, we divided it the way we did for a reason, based on population, politics, etc. Same here. Really, in reality, there's only one world, just like there's only one Dharmakaya, there's only one enlightenment. But our minds create these various realms and various worlds to understand the absolute, to understand the Dharmakaya, because it's too big for us to really comprehend. It's like the ocean or the Great Lakes. If you look at a map, there are 5 Great Lakes on the map. But if you remove those arbitrary borders, there's only one body of water. And that body of water, if you follow it, goes to the ocean. And we divide the ocean, the Atlantic, the Pacific, etc., the Indian Ocean. But really, there's only one ocean. Same with us. There's really only one realm. There's only one world. There's only one Dharmakaya, but we separate it into pieces so we can understand more clearly. Sensei, how old are you? You look so young. Thanks, I appreciate that. I'd rather not reveal my exact age because, you know, this is the internet. I try to maintain some privacy, but I'm near my 40s, put it that way. So thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. Diva Buddha X said, could Goku and Superman realize enlightenment? They're both gods at this point. Well, and this is when my comic book nerd comes out, it depends on what issue you're looking at. I mean, Superman, his power level is shot through the roof, or he goes down to almost nothing depending on who he's fighting and what the author wants to do, right? So he's been God level, he's been a big guy with muscles. I think the potential is always there. Same with Goku, right? I'm thinking about when he fought Jiren in the Tournament of Power, and which is really great, by the way. Everyone should watch the Tournament of Power, even if you don't watch Dragon Ball Z, because that was just a really good arc. Power level goes up and down depending on who he's playing and what they want to do. But I think the possibility is always there. It's just difficult. It's difficult, right? If you're Superman, and I think this is why we all like Superman so much, even though he's kind of a boring character because he has every power in existence, is because even though he is super powerful, he still has that core of morality, which we wouldn't expect. Just like Zeus has all of these superpowers, but he has no core of morality. Goku, same thing, extremely powerful, but he's grounded by his family and friends. Superman is grounded by being raised in Kansas, I believe, by the Kents, and, you know, that good old boy life, those all-American values. So the potential is there, but it is going to be more difficult. I think for us in the West, it's more difficult for us to realize enlightenment because we have so many toys and so many distractions that even though we aren't gods, we can fake it, right? So that's why we need our spirituality to ground us more, to keep us whole, to keep us centered. But yeah, good question. Very good question. You look like, Great Hermit said, you look like you're in your early 20s. Well, thank you. I try. Loady said, realms can be scientifically explained by the multiverse theory. Quite interesting. That's true. That's true. It's always interesting to see the comparisons between Buddhism and science and things of that nature and how they interact, etc. And you're right. I think the realms could be explained with multiverse theory. That's a very good point. Thank you. Great Hermit said, it must be all those meditations and vegan diet. Maybe it is. I don't know. Meditation and vegetables agree with me, I guess. Thanks a lot. Anything else this evening? All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Amitabha. Until next time.